Welcome, everybody. I'm John Stack. I'm Executive Director and Dean Designate of the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs. And it's an honor and a privilege to host this important Ruth K. and Shepard Broad lecture. I want to acknowledge the generosity of the Broad family for all they've done for FIU. I also want to acknowledge the extraordinary gift that we've received from the Green Family Foundation that it has just been extraordinary. Our co-sponsors include the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center, the African and African Diaspora Studies Program, the Departments of Political Science and International Relations, our College of Law, and certainly Colorado State University. Ernesto doesn't know this, but I went to school down the road at DU, at the Graduate School of International Studies in Denver. Let me just provide some context for this important meeting. We're here to have a frank conversation about the issues of migration and citizenship that are at the center of the current Haitian Dominican, at the center of Haitian and Dominican relations. What we are witnessing on the island of Hispaniola is not unique to these two neighboring countries, however. There is a clear universality to the patterns of human migration and the various forces that drive people to cross national borders. We see the same issues confronting countries throughout the world, in Europe, Africa, Asia, and elsewhere in the Americas. According to the UN High Commissioner of Refugees, more than 4 million Syrians have left their country since 2011. Hundreds of thousands have sought asylum in Europe, and millions have done so in countries bordering Syria. The Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs reports that global migration continues to rise, especially in South-South migration. Some 232 million international migrants are living in the world today. So that migration clearly poses challenges for both the host country and the country of origin, and at the heart of the matter, of course, are issues of human rights. The question at hand is not how do we stop migration. This is a non-starter because human rights have been in constant motion since the dawn of our species. The question, I believe, that needs to be asked is how do we balance the inexorable movement of peoples across borders with issues of governance, the rule of law, sovereignty, and of course, justice and human rights. As a way of deepening this conversation, the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs will host Haiti's former Prime Minister, Laurent Lamont, on October 14th at 7 p.m. in GC 140, to be followed by a conversation with former DR President Leonel Fernandez on October 22nd at 7 p.m. in the Green School's Broad Auditorium. That's the big room at 125. It is now my pleasure to welcome all of you and to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, Dr. Frank Mora, Director of the Kimberly Green Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. Frank.
Thank you. Oh, is this working? No, I have a... Yes. Can you hear me? I heard a no. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see all of you and so many of you here. And Dr. Stack, Thank you for the intro and your continued support of this and other programs. So this is, as you know, pitched as a teach-in, right? We are not going to be involved in advocacy here. At least we are not going to be involved in advocacy. Our purpose here is to have, as Dr. Stack said, a serious, frank discussion that hopefully brings to light some of these issues, brings some depth, brings some perspective. We have a pretty diverse group here, right? We have, in terms of disciplines, we have law, we have history, we have sociology, and we have politics. I guess we missed an economist. But we have, and the purpose of that is so that you can see how different disciplines and individuals see this issue from different perspectives. This is going to be a conversation. My job is not to simply ask questions, but to engage our panelists in a back and forth and have them engage one another in what is known as a Davos-style conversation. During this process, I'm going to bring you into the conversation, engage you, and I'll let you know 5 minutes in advance. And I don't know what the logistics is about mics. Do we have mics? Will we have mics for the audience? Yes. We will have. So when I'm about 5 minutes out, I'm going to say to you, I'm going to come back to you all and have you engage, make your comments and your questions. Let's make sure that we are succinct with those. And thank you again for being here. I want to, before I briefly introduce the panelists, I want to recognize the consul from the Haitian Consul General, Guy Francois, is here. Thank you so much. And it looks like we have a delegation from the Dominican Consul General here. I don't think that the consul's here, but thank you all for being here. And it's always good to have official representation at these events. Is exactly the kind of thing that the Green School and LAC is interested in doing. So let me introduce briefly my colleagues, and I'll go from my direct right here. Eduardo Gamarra, Professor Gamarra is the Professor of Politics and International Relations here at FIU. He was for a long time one of my predecessors as Director of the Latin American and Caribbean Center. Big shoes to fill. Thank you, Eduardo, for being here. Chantal Verna, who is Associate Professor of History and International Relations here at FIU, and she's going to be bringing a lot of this historical context and has been working on these issues for some time. Then we have Jean Royer. He's a Professor of Anthropology and the African and African Diaspora Studies Director here at FIU. Thank you, Jean, for being here. We have also next to Jean, we have Ernesto Sagaz. He is not from FIU, but he's joined us for this conversation. He is an Associate Professor of Ethnic Studies at Colorado State University. He has written quite a bit on the Dominican Republic. And then, last but certainly not least, we have from the law school, Heriberto Roman, who is, as I mentioned, faculty member in the College of Law, former associate dean in the College of Law, and is the director of the college's immigration initiatives currently. Okay, so I guess we should start with some context. And I should go to you, Chantal, and I want to go to you. But before I do that, I'm going to start with Eduardo for a second. Eduardo, could you just right now explain the situation today? How did we get to, what were the key drivers, the motives that led us to this point?
That's a very big question, Frank, and one that actually Chantal, I think, as a historian, can provide the historical context much better than I can. But let me just say that at the current moment, I think you have to look at two very important, broadly historical contexts. One is the Dominican Republic is a country that experienced a transition to democracy in 1978, and which today lives under probably one of the most stable democratic systems in the region, a two-party system, multi-party but really two-party dominant, which has had a very significant process of economic growth over the last decade and a half, going from about $8-9 billion in GDP to today over $60 billion in GDP, a very significant process of growth. And so in large measure, given the context of the island, economic growth has occurred on one side of the island, while on the other side of the island, you also had a process of transition to democracy in the mid-1980s, and a process that has been much more convoluted than its neighbor on the other side, a process that has had a recurrent pattern not only of problematic elections, but also a recurrent pattern of problematic international intervention. For better or for worse, international intervention in Haiti has not produced the outcomes that one might expect. And so as a result, what you've had here is this very complex relationship under democracy in both sides. One side of the island, very prosperous, with a pattern of job creation and so on, and the other side, a pattern of very problematic rounds of elections and very problematic experiences, especially with the international environment. Now, if you look at that, if you place then the current situation within that context, you have basically, some additional, let's call them accelerators to the situation. The most important accelerator, perhaps in Haiti, over the last few years was the earthquake of 2010, a very tragic earthquake that created and accelerated the pattern of migration over into the Dominican Republic. So you have, in my view at least, I think we have to look at this debate within the context of how two countries are trying to construct democracy under very difficult challenges.
So you're saying that the asymmetries in those sort of recent is part of the
It's a fundamental part of it, although of course there is a longer historical pattern that I would prefer to have.
Super segue, Chantal.
Yeah, there's definitely a longer historical pattern, and I think it's important to think about that longer history because it offers us, in my perspective, a better context. The reason why I think that the context that you provided, Eduardo, is problematic is that it reinforces looking at Haiti and the Dominican Republic as two separate entities on this shared island and the tensions between these two places, when in fact the politics and the economics and the social well-being and even culture of the two societies really have been integrated. So it's not to say that we don't see what you have outlined in terms of the economic growth, urbanization that has taken place in the Dominican Republic, and the challenges that Haiti has faced, particularly after 1986 and the end of the dictatorship. But that if we take that more recent history and we put it into a longer context, to the point where there was an island that European colonial interests came and began to create divisions within a territory that we now identify as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right? So that movement across a space, John Stack began this event talking about how you really can't stop movement of people. Mm-hmm. And I think that we see that in a very concentrated manner on the island. And for me, one of the most notable things about the history of Haiti and the Dominican Republic and how it's playing out in present day issues is the fact that people have traversed across the territory in order to pursue economic opportunities in both directions, right? Oftentimes we are only hearing about migration from Haiti to the Dominican Republic, but there has also been a longer history of migration from the Dominican Republic to Haiti. Equally so politically, that there has been interest on both sides to gain allies and advocates on both sides of the island in order to advocate for particular political positions.
Chantal, isn't it, I mean, this goes back to the point I try to make, which is that in every two countries, two societies that are together, if there is an asymmetry, and by asymmetry I mean just in terms of political stability, economic development, clearly there's going to be an in-migration to those countries. We see it in the United States, of course, right, on the U.S.-Mexico border. So if trends continue, right, that Eduardo mentioned, this will automatically, inevitably continue to be a problem, right? With the Dominican Republic resisting because they're concerned about the burden of this? Is that what's explain?
So let me speak directly to that. So part of the language of the burden is Dominicans versus Haitians, and part of what needs to be discussed is, again, this shared history, this shared present, and the need to find a resolution that addresses issues and concerns on
But
both
I'm
both
interested in
sides of the.
explaining. So I'm not,
Right.
we're not to the point of this is how it should be. I'm not into a normative discussion yet. I want to explain the situation from a historical, political context. So that's what I want to focus on before we get to what it ought to be. I want to make sure that you finish.
Sure. So, what more could I say specifically with regards to both sides?
Yeah.
Maybe if you could reframe for me.
Well, I mean, is there more to the historical context that explains why we are where we are today?
Well, specifically in terms of seeing this issue of seeing the island as this two separate space, if you think about also the way that nationalism is defined, right? So that's
Okay.
very precise.
Okay.
Nationalism is defined, particularly Dominican nationalism has historically, in the 20th century and through the end of the 19th century, been defined in opposition to Haitian presence and Haitian identity. And I think that's central. That's part of a central factor that's underlying the policies that we're seeing right now.
Perfect. That's an excellent,
Okay.
another excellent segue to you, Ernesto, since
Yeah,
she just mentioned Dominican Republic and national identity.
Yeah, let me start by getting rid of some labels. I always tell my students that there's no such a thing as U.S. foreign policy. Okay, there are foreign policies. Oftentimes the CIA and the State Department work in separate
I would disagree with you, but
ways.
go ahead, go ahead.
But yeah, so there's no such a thing. So when we're saying the Dominican Republic, this and Haiti, that we're using a very broad brush to paint this. I think that the issue that's taking us here right now is not only the issue of migration of Haitians, that has been taking place for a long time, and we can spend a lot of time here talking about how Haitians are portrayed or imagined, in some cases, scapegoat or stereotype in Dominican society. I think that the issue right now is not about Haitians per se, but actually about Dominicans of Haitian ancestry. Okay, so we're talking about a series of constitutional modifications, Supreme Court decisions that essentially have stripped Dominicans of a citizenship that for several generations they not only believed they had. Okay, so we have several generations of Dominicans of Haitian ancestry that now have been, if not rendered stateless, they have been put in a situation, in a legal limbo, okay, regarding the rights that they felt they had as citizens of the Dominican Republic. Okay, so we have an issue of Haitian migrants, and that's an issue that the different Dominican administrations have dealt with in different ways, and as a sovereign nation, well, they have certain rights to implement immigration laws in different ways. But essentially, I think that the current pressing issue is about people that have been born, raised, and in some cases have died believing they are Dominicans, and practically overnight, in a matter of a very small time frame, all of a sudden they are not Dominicans anymore.
So,
legal colleague here
yet another excellent segue. So, there's obviously Haitian law, and there's Dominican law, and then there's, of course, international law, right? And some of these are often in tension, right? They contradict. And so that's what creates the controversy in many ways.
Nothing happens by accident.
So, is this a natural tension? Is this something that was created sort of in an artificial way? Can you consolidate these tensions and contradictions within these different sets of laws?
I guess the best way to look at it is the way the issue has been framed, even here in terms of the first few speakers and the Q&A has been characterized as essentially an issue of migration. The more problematic issue that arises here is a constitutional issue, not of the Haitian Constitution, but of the Dominican Constitution itself in terms of its interpretation, as well as international norms. Let me step back for a moment, because that's basically a conclusion that's quite loaded. When we look at notions of citizenship and membership in any society, particularly with respect to Western constructions, there have been historically two classic forms of means to attain citizenship. One, by blood, and this is dating back to Roman Greco era that created democracy, so Western society. And many people argue that derived from African societies, although less documented in terms of Western constructions at least. So that's a debate for another day. The other classic form, essentially being born of parents who are citizen. The other classic form that has been characterized recently in U.S. debates, particularly by the infamous Donald Trump, birthright citizenship, to be born in a country. And in the context of this issue, while the issue in terms of migration or immigration would be a subject of a panel and worthy of debate, but a sovereign country's determination of its immigration policies is really that sovereign country's domain. The problem here that arises for many human rights advocates and writers, and I have been engaging in that type of discourse, both in terms of court proceedings and advocacy in the United States, just to make that point clear, is a question of constitutional interpretation and human rights. The Dominican Republic, dating back to its 1929 Constitution, recognized both forms of citizenship, by blood and by land, being born there.
But the Supreme Court of the Dominican Republic has made a judgment.
Well, that's what I'm going to get to. Well, the Supreme Court made a determination that any political body could make a determination that moving forward, you would do away with just soulless birthright citizenship. The problem arises with that opinion in 2013. It didn't just do it prospectively. It went back nearly a century and generations of individuals that were Dominican according to the relevant constitution, as well as the relevant immigration laws of 1939 that interpreted these points, considered all of these people that were citizens essentially by one stroke of a pen, non-citizens.
Is there an international norm that goes to the issue of a law being retroactive? Is that against international norms?
Actually, the Dominican Constitution itself, as well as the actual language, as well as the American Convention, that the Dominican Republic was a signatory to, recognized, among other things, laws against retroactivity, racism, a host of factors that made it problematic. And the International Court, not on one occasion, but on at least two different occasions, more recently, just months ago, condemned the Dominican Republic for creating statelessness in its country.
But for the retroactive piece or the statelessness issue?
Essentially, the retroactivity created the statelessness, the forcible removal of former citizens.
Eduardo.
Well, this is very interesting because, I want to state at the outset that as a Hispanic in the United States, although I came legally, some would argue with that, but in any event, I do believe, I do believe in birthright citizenship. But be that as it may, Edilberto, the reality is that most countries in the world do not recognize birthright. It's not just a Western tradition. In fact, it's extraordinarily rooted, in fact, in the fact that we are the Americas and we had vast territories of underpopulated countries. And one of the reasons we did, in fact, right now, it really, when you look at it worldwide, we, Canada, and the rest of Latin America, it's really even interesting because even the Haitian Constitution has a very dubious interpretation of birthright citizenship. So it's not something that's universal.
No, no one said universal, historical.
But no, not even historically, and it's not just a German invention, as you've said earlier.
No, I didn't say that. Maybe you did.
No, but but I think in other participations that you've had, you've said it was kind of. But no, Ireland, Great Britain, France, etc. Most have this, and as I said, I fundamentally believe in birthright citizenship, and that's where I'm in disagreement with the Dominican ruling. The second thing that's important to understand here is that there was a constitutional reform process in the Dominican Republic that took place from 2007 to 2010, and that consolidated a process of national dialogue in the Dominican Republic that led to a constitution with two articles that you cited. One article which essentially redefines nationality, right, on the basis that you have correctly said. And then Article 40, which you also correctly said, which essentially says this is not retroactive. So I'm in agreement with you. But what I think we also need to understand, and this is where it becomes, where the debate really lies. I'm again, I don't want to mention Trump too much, but the reality is that today a lot of the debate over, for example, gay marriage, especially when you look at the Republicans, is about how the Supreme Court is extraordinarily wrong in ruling on gay marriage. and that therefore we ought to, some of us ought not to follow that law because we disagree with it. The Supreme Court, and this is something created also by the new Dominican Constitution, the Constitutional Tribunal, which becomes their judicial review instance, right? That instance of judicial review essentially ruled on a particular case which interprets the Constitution. And again, as I said, I think the retroactive part is, what really ought to be questioned. But the fact of the matter is that this is it's the tribunal that is the Supreme Court of the Dominican Republic, which interprets the Constitution, and this is the interpretation of the Constitution. Right or wrong, I think it's a different issue.
Anyway, I want you to react, and then I want to go to Jean.
Yeah, just generally speaking, again, we are characterizing this issue as an immigration issue, purely an immigration issue. But the issue that needs to be stressed, that with respect to anywhere from tens of thousands to more accurately above 200,000 people overnight that were formerly citizens consistent with the domestic constitution of the Dominican Republic as well as international norms and treaties were citizens. The retroactivity is what's unconscionable here. It's what overnight, it is like saying African Americans, because when they first arrived here as slaves, were not documented, then because of political whim of Donald Trump or some perhaps terrorist attack in the future, can be stripped of their citizenship because they can't prove original documentation. The voiceless in that country are left with very little choice, and that's what makes it untenable. The migration issue and sovereignty, and just to issue an issue of, in terms of the history of citizenship, it's unequivocal that both in terms of Greco and Roman constructions recognize jus solus and jus sanguinis. This is not an invention from a law professor. It is throughout history. The fact remains that the majority of countries have done away with jus solus, but think of the histories of those countries in Europe that don't necessarily have the greatest record with respect to citizenship and membership. And some of it has been a reaction to the influx and are reaping or facing the turmoil associated with it. So if anything, at this era, we should embrace countries that continue to have an inclusive measure, not to have an exclusionary one that strips hundreds of thousands of people of their rights.
John, we were talking about identity. We made a reference of race. Could you put this in a sort of larger context of the region, or at least of the Caribbean, please?
Yeah. So So I'm here, I believe, because I've been working on the African diaspora in Latin America, and then I can eventually provide some regional contextualization. And the interesting thing that when we think about but before answering that issue, because race, I think, we have to talk about race here. It's a lot about race, what's going on here. And but before we engage in that, I've been in my research working a great deal on what has been called the multicultural turn in Latin America, el giro hacia el multiculturalismo. And what's very interesting is that when you see in a region characterized by anti-black racism, an anti-black racism that dates back to the period of slavery and importation of slaves, as well as the successive periods of black marginalization, you've had since the beginning of the 1990s until now, the adoption of new constitutions and constitutional reforms, as well as special laws across the region that, in fact, are all aimed at recognizing the existence within national borders of folks who thought, and Afro-descendants particularly, who thought of themselves as being invisibilized by the narratives of national identity in their specific Latin American country. You've had this multicultural turn recognizing their existence and giving them eventually collective rights in particular situations, or adopting the passing of laws that protects them from segregation and discrimination. And so here, which is quite surprising, I would say, is that while there is across the region a wave of constitutional reforms and constitutional amendments and passing of special laws that all have for preoccupation to incorporate people who have been marginalized, indigenous and Afro-descendants. And here we have, on the contrary, in the case of the Dominican Republic, processes of constitutional reforms that end up doing the exact contrary of what has been taking place in the rest
Go
of
to
the
the race
region.
issue, please.
So, right
race,
now?
yeah.
Yeah. The race issue, I think, is any person, I mean, let me say, let me not be, but the race issue is quite simple. Is that when you see, prior to the multicultural turn in Latin America, Latin American nations liked, and particularly their elites, liked to imagine the national identities in terms of mestizaje, race mixing. And mestizaje here refers specifically to the mixing between whites and indigenous people. It's mestizaje, it's not mulataje, but that has led to an alterization and otherization of black folks across the region. And here, while the narrative of national identity across the region has moved away from mestizaje or from race mixing, of course in Cuba, in some places, the mestizaje, the race mixing might have been a mulataje. If we talk to Cuba or Brazil, for instance, the democracia racial. But the official narration of the nation moved away from idea of mestizaje, while it seems that it remains very much anchored in from what I know, in the landscape of the Dominican Republic, and this conjoined with an anti-Asianism, which is in fact an anti-black, an anti-blackness. And so
Before we leave the race issue, I'm going to come to you, Chantal. But Ernesto, you've written and worked a lot on the issue of race in the Dominican Republic. Can you add to that?
Yeah, I would add to that when we talk about anti-Asianism, obviously there's a racial component. The way the lens that I use to look at it is more of an intersectional lens. Race is certainly a component, or not particularly race, but the way Haitians are racialized in the Dominican Republic. That is, in the Dominican Republic, no one can talk about pure race. It's only Trujillo at some point, dwell on that. But essentially, it's the way Haitian immigrants and now Dominicans of Haitian ancestry are racialized. But I think that there are other components that play a hand in what has been called anti-Haitianismo. There's also an ethnic component. It's one culture seen as versus another culture. One heritage versus another. There's a class component, okay? Actually, I argue that relations between Haiti and the Dominican Republic have most of the time since 19th century been pretty good, okay? The issue is the lower class Haitians, okay? Haitians of upper class Haitians are treated as VIPs, red carpets roll out to them when they go to Dominican universities, they have business in the Dominican Republic, they are very much welcome, and their money is very much welcome in the Dominican Republic. The issue happens to be with lower class immigrants that also happen to be black. And there's even a gender component, to the way Haitian men and Haitian women are imagined and seen vis-a-vis Dominican men and women in the formation of anti-Haitianism. So at one point it was a dominant ideology in the Dominican Republic. Trujillo took it to new heights. Some of the best ideologues in Trujillo's administration, like Manuel Arturo Peña Valle, Joaquín Balaguer himself, concocted this ideology of anti-Haitianismo for many decades after Trujillo's death. Balaguer was influential. I think that the scenes of something called anti-Haitianismo is pretty much gone, but certainly there's a way in which Haitians and things Haitians are otherized in Dominican Republic. And again, what I see as the most problematic part is not necessarily the immigrant component that's in most societies, as you correctly mentioned, the case of Mexicans in the United States, and Donald Trump, who's now writing an article for me. All I have to do is quote him. The article writes itself. That is not the most problematic component. That is easy to understand. The most problematic component is essentially 3, maybe 4 generations of Dominicans that now are being rendered stateless. Okay, and alien also, in a way.
Okay, thank you. Chantal?
Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to comment on really dovetails with the last 2 comments, which is the way that blackness in the Dominican Republic is associated with Haitianness, and that we assume that if anybody is phenotypically black, in any way identifiable as black, then they would be of Haitian descent. Is that a part of the Dominican reality? Absolutely, yes, for a number of reasons, some of which I can speak to. But it's not simply that, right? That there are people of African descent as part of also Dominican identity, which is part of the reason that this is really complicated in terms of, again, denying citizenship to a segment of the population that is Dominican, or we also just have this other mixture of people migrating from other parts of the Caribbean, not simply Haiti. So it's just very blurry, and I think that's a good example of how it's all capped under this identification of anybody seen as black in the Dominican Republic as being Haitian. I'll stop there and probably introduce some other things after.
Eduardo, could you, so maybe for my own edification, could you tell us where we are today as we move forward on this issue? Right. Where are we? What needs to happen? What could happen?
Okay, well, I think it's important to take an additional step in the explanation here, and that is that when the ruling occurred in 2013, September of 2013, the Dominican government, in fact, was really in a very difficult situation because they really did not agree with the ruling. Contrary to popular belief, the government of President Medina found itself in a quandary, and essentially had to find, a way in which, right? And imagine again, if President Obama had been anti-gay marriage, what would he have done in responding to a ruling of the Supreme Court? So I'm, making the equivalent here of a government that didn't really agree with the ruling. And I can tell you, Edilberto, because I was there, and I was advising the Haitian government at the time, and was involved in these discussions with the Dominican government. So I can tell you from my experience. All right. Well, in the end, as part of that bilateral dialogue, which also was not sponsored by the United States, all right, this was not a U.S.-sponsored debate. In fact, the moderator of this debate was Venezuela. All right. And so, I can talk more about that a little bit later. The U.S. had nothing to do with this, and the U.S., in fact, was quite surprised when these negotiations, these bilateral negotiations, moved forward, and where the Haitian government and the Dominican government tried to find some kind of way out that did not violate the Dominican Constitution, that did not violate the ruling of the Supreme Court of the Dominican Republic, and they essentially came out with this so-called regularization plan, right? Now, however one looks at it, right, whether you're in agreement or in disagreement with it, what that plan did was to try to deal specifically with the issue of the Dominicans, the Dominicans of Haitian descent. And what the regularization plan established, and in my view, the real problem, other than retroactively taking away citizenship and then trying to find a way to, again, retroactively give them back their citizenship, right, is that what the regularization plan did essentially was it established a time frame where Dominicans of Haitian descent could apply, right, obtaining, and they could apply in 3 ways. They could apply with their birth certificate, they could apply with their passports, or they could apply with a cédula, right? And what you have is, in fact, right now, as of yesterday, about 230,000 Haitians Haitians of Dominican descent have applied, right?
You mean
And-
Dominicans of
par-
Haitian
Pardon me, Dominicans of Haitian descent, sorry. Further. Now, and over 130,000 have already received their permits. Now, these are temporary permits whereby over the course of a year and 2 years, they will be able to basically recover their citizenship. Now, this is, in my view, the Solomonic solution of a government that found itself, facing a constitutional ruling over which it had absolutely no control, right? And you can look at several of the declarations, both of President Martelly, Laurent Lamothe, the prime minister at the time, and the declarations by Gustavo Montalvo, the declarations by Danilo Medina, and those negotiations that occurred, which aimed really at moving this forward in a Solomonic way, because there was no other way. There was no other way to circumvent a Supreme Court ruling. And that's what you have in place.
Thank you. Anyway, so the process that we have now, from a legal standpoint, do you think this is sound? It meets the sort of international legal norm requirements, or do you see from a legal standpoint also this being outside of the conventions?
The challenges here is that where Dr. Gamara is addressing the question of a political solution to a legal problem. And the problem that arises with respect to that is that these individuals consistent, and this is not one law professor's view, this is more than one international tribunal examining these issues and interpreting the text, the plain text of the constitutions at issue, the Dominican constitutions at issue, is the stripping away of citizenship and, in essence, taking a person that has full rights, political, social, and cultural membership that are the constructions of citizenship, and essentially stripping that away and giving them a status, a residency type status that may lead to full membership, but doesn't necessarily have to. And in terms of the figures that were just raised.
What rights do they have under that status?
It's unclear in terms of the regularization. That's part of the problem. It is essentially like overnight, if you in fact are a citizen, overnight you are a legal resident. And in terms of violations of the law or any political upheaval or future undertakings by the government, you put yourself in jeopardy.
So the legal resident doesn't have any protections?
They have some protection, but certainly not the same as a
Can
citizen.
they be deported under?
Well, it remains to be seen. But the problem here is the taking away of full status to create essentially a quasi-legal status that hopefully eventually would lead. And that's what's problematic here.
Okay.
And I would add, it's not even legal residence, it's legal limbo residency. They become legal residents once they apply and their status is regularized. In the interim, if you don't have the proper documents or the money or whatever,
law,
you're in the twilight zone.
There's no executing law that says what is allowed, not allowed, it's not clear what your rights are.
Although there's a process that people can follow through, but as was pointed out, until you get your documents saying that those 200,000 people that already applied, until you get those documents, you're in a legal limbo. And again, the process is fine. It's what precedes the process. You have a stripping of citizenship overnight. So I was born in the United States. One day I wake up and I'm no longer an American, and I have to apply.
No, I understand that, but looking forward now, right? I'm not looking back. Looking forward. Does this new status now provide a way forward to address
Hopefully
the political legal challenge that was done before? Or we don't know.
Hopefully so.
Hopefully.
It's still in
Well,
flux.
what it does, again, there are approximately 258,000 people who have, according to the Ministry of Interior and Police, have registered in that ministry. They have now handed 130,000 of these permits within a year, and if you have a passport, you have 2 years, right? So if you don't have a passport, you have 1 year. And during that year, or those 2 years, you have the right to employment and the right to legal residence. And you have what we in fact, the Dominicans followed very closely international migration debates. And so a lot of what they've talked about is pathways to citizenship, right? So we stripped the citizenship with one hand, but now we're giving you a pathway to return that citizenship. In the meantime, if you've applied, you are theoretically protected. Now, there are a number of problems that we can point out here. Frank, those 130,000 people are, with these documents, are now, in the context of the next couple of years, going to apply for citizenship and will recover that citizenship that they lost.
Hopefully.
Now, hopefully, right? Now, there's still, 100 and something thousand who don't have their documents and who should receive their documents. Now, my criticism of this is, well, apart from the fact that it shouldn't have happened in the first place, as we've said, but the problem is that in my view, the time frame in which this was to happen was very short. And there's another very important problem, because I think, I think we have to be balanced in the analysis of this, right? It's not something where we're gonna continuously demonize the Dominicans either for being racists or for somehow trying to exclude. But let's also understand that in the negotiations, the government of Haiti agreed to provide documents to their citizens residing in the Dominican Republic. All right? And frankly, and I've told this to numerous people, and at the time I made Haiti has a very difficult problem with documenting its population. And this isn't, I don't think this is something where we ought to be trying to draw applause for things we say. But the reality is that the Haitian government should not have made a promise that it couldn't keep. And so part of the problem with the implementation of the regularization plan in the Dominican Republic is the fact that the Haitian government was incapable of documenting those citizens.
Okay.
And so they couldn't go up.
Wait, hold on.
Historically,
Wait,
it's been,
Chantal.
please.
Yeah, I'll give you a word. So in 5 minutes, we're going to go now to the audience for your quick, concise questions or comments, right? I'm going to go to Chantal. I have one other specific question, and then we'll probably go to questions. So Chantal.
Yeah, I mean, historically, it's important to think about and to be aware of the fact that this problem of documentation, which I completely agree with, in the present day is problematic and needs to be resolved. But that too has been a long-standing issue, on both sides of the island, and also if we want to simply focus on people of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic, and if you think about the hundreds of thousands of people who have migrated, the context within which they had migrated in order to serve as laborers in U.S.-owned sugar plantations, who at that time did not provide proper documentation. So what I'm trying to, the reason I'm putting this in a longer view is to say, bring it back to the class issue that was raised earlier, that those who will be most negatively impacted by this circumstance are those who, for all intents and purposes, are being used and are not, people don't necessarily care to document them, or they may not have access to that documentation, or whether it's in terms of funds or ability to gain access to the documentation. So when we rely on these documents in order to reinforce these systems that have been set up, and that within an international context we're trying to reinforce, there's this missing piece that I think is really important that we have to pay attention to.
Okay. Anyway, and apologize for the ignorance. And Linda, you could probably, how did this issue come to the court? What were the factors that led to the court taking on this case and making this kind of decision, right? What were the immediate, not the historical, but were the immediate circumstances that led us to the decision of the court?
Well, it depends on perspective, right? As we can tell by the reactions of the audience in terms of applauding to certain views or positions taken. It's been a long-lasting and heated political debate. But many legal observers that examine the issue have looked to decisions dating back to, and they're ones that predate this, but Inter-American Court decisions, Inter-American Court on Human Rights decisions that dealt with children being unable to seek to obtain documentation, even to be educated. And there was a decision of two little girls, the Yen decision of 2004, that basically challenged the process of denying either birth certificates or the celulas, the documentation to prove residency, essentially being born there. And that was brought before the commission. The commission then brought it before the court. The court sanctioned, found that the behavior to be violated of various provisions of the American Convention. And then part of the view by many is part of a political reaction to that was a constitutional convention to deal with the issue of essentially immigration, and then that was challenged, leading to the 2013 court decision. And the aspects that is the most controversial is the retroactivity.
So we don't know what exactly led to the court taking on this case?
Sure. It was
What
a
was-
challenge to that the 2010 constitutional amendment.
Okay.
That basically
And
did
who
away
presented
with
the challenge?
with-
Who presented the?
and a woman, actually, a woman challenging her inability to, I have the name listed here, but,
A Dominican woman of Haitian descent presenting?
I'm sorry? Yes.
Okay.
Challenging the effort associated with the
With the
constitutional
Constitution. I got it.
amendment.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, essentially, the issue stems from a woman who had a birth certificate, who went to register to vote at the time in which she turned 18, a Dominican woman at the time, right? She went before the a notary general who then reading the Constitution, right? Reading the new Constitution of 2010, essentially told the woman, you are no longer a Dominican citizen, and confiscated her documents. This went through the Dominican court system, and it was eventually the case that came up before the Supreme Court, the Tribunal Constitucional, and it was the ruling about this case, which again, we can disagree with it, right? But it was a ruling of the Dominican Supreme Court. And so here, I think, again, as I told you, I am not in agreement with the ruling, but there is a sovereign right here that we're also talking about. And, the Dominican Republic had the sovereign right to design a constitution through a process of national dialogue, and they agreed on that.
Okay.
Whether we like it or not. There was a ruling in 2013, whether we like it or not, that's a constitutional ruling.
Yeah, but Frank, if I may, it is one thing to make a ruling prospectively, all right? And we've had wrong-headed decisions. It is like defending Plessy versus Ferguson, it's retroactivity. History will look at this and will not look favorably to the retroactivity because either the numbers are wrong that in terms of the actual individuals there, Amnesty International was wrong, or the figures are larger than we expect because while the figure of 2030 was bantered about, there are also figures of tens of thousands of individuals that have left the Dominican Republic, and many of them are believed to be Dominicans of Haitian descent. So we will know in time what the actual figures were, but it's the retroactivity aspect that is not a sovereignty issue. The retroactivity issue, it goes beyond that and speaks to international norms as well as sovereignty.
Okay, got it. All right, now we are to the audience. So, Sally, are you the only one with a mic? No. Okay.
There's two sides.
Two mics.
So we're going to go one side here. We're going to go this. We're going to do a dance, okay? So, but we're going to start here. This gentleman right over here with a gray coat. If you could, sir, identify yourself and then ask the question or make the comment.
I'm Jose Mañana, I'm a Dominican-born person. One thing I will say, la República Dominicana es un país soberano. Y we have the right to make our own migratory rules. We have two countries in the same island. And both countries, in order to cohabitate, they have obligation to perform. Under the regulation law, Haiti was given, the authority of Haiti was given 18 months to provide documents to their citizens to prove that who they say they were. If I'm a Jamaican-born person,
Sir, make it brief.
I'm gonna make it brief, and I fly to any country because I have committed some crime in this country, but that country there has an open border and doesn't filter no one. The Dominican Republic has that issue. We have an open border. Haitian comes right from here, and they don't specify who they cannot show who they were. And Haitian was supposed to give them their document, and they couldn't provide them.
Right.
They were given 18 months. In 18 months, they couldn't provide it. It is not the fault of the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
Haiti failed.
Thank you. Over here now, over here. That lady, Sally, that lady in the back, please. If you can identify yourself and then ask. You get the mic, please, the mic.
Marcelino. When I hear the word stripped of, I'm a little confused because you cannot strip of something that they never had. They were never citizens. They were born of illegal parents. We have a constitution. The Constitution clearly stipulates children born of illegal parents are not Dominicans. So the word stripped off is improperly used. Secondly, the word stateless is improperly used because the Haitian Constitution, which we also need to respect, says children born of Haitian parents will always be Haitians regardless of where they are born. So we have to get
Okay.
They have not been stripped. Our Constitution from 1844, from 1929, 1994 clearly states children born of illegal parents are not Dominicans.
Okay.
And we need to respect the Dominican Constitution, and we need to respect the Haitian Constitution.
Okay.
Because both countries are...
Thank you, ma'am. So there's been two comments, not really two questions. So what I'd like to do is have the panelists, but really brief.
Really, one suggestion.
Okay, so real brief. Hold on. So
use your mic.
if any of you wants to react to the two comments, please do.
As I tell my students, do not necessarily, I'll wait for people. As I tell my students, when you hear a lecturer or an advocate addressing something that you disagree with it, research it. Look up the 1929 Constitution that speaks to this issue. It does not say what you just said. It doesn't.
Okay. Anybody else wants to react to the two comments? Hold on. You go ahead, Chantal. Yes?
No,
Chantal.
One of the things that
Hold on. We're not done yet. Hold on. Go ahead, Chantal.
Sure. One of the things that I wanted to mention earlier is that we're, focusing a lot on the laws, on the policies, on the structures, and I understand that you're sort of trying to pinpoint what's happening and how it's unfolding, but I think what is also happening that is more difficult to pinpoint is the impact of these policies and process of regulation on social interactions and social perceptions. I mean, even just the framing of the first comment of immigrants immediately assuming, criminalizing immigrants in a particular way. That impacts people who, whether they have documentation or not, that their lives have historically been and are very likely to continue to be harassed in either experiencing issues of violence, or people who have left, right, because they don't want to be subject to those conditions, whether or not they have the right to be in the Dominican Republic or not. So I just want to bring that up because that is very consistent with what has happened historically. The most salient example that people do and don't like to refer to is the 1937 massacre. And even though it began from the perspective of intellectuals and politicians, that the execution of that took place because citizens, seeds planted in the minds of citizens who otherwise would not have engaged in that.
Let me get back to the audience. Okay. So,
Frank, the Haitian voice, perhaps.
Can I add a little bit?
I don't know who.
Frank?
I am Mike Rodrigo. I'm a physician from Haiti. I've lived in the United States for 50 years. And I want to add first a few elements to the history between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. That's very important. For 30 years, Haiti owned the entire island. okay? And the Dominicans have never forgotten that. Yes, 30 years.
Excuse me.
please, and their president
No,
was.
no, no, no. When some, excuse me. Hello.
That's
Excuse me.
the thing. Number
One
two.
second, please. The first thing, ladies and gentlemen, we need to respect the person that has the mic, okay? I will control the time that the person has the mic. Okay, everyone, go ahead, ma'am, finish,
Okay.
please.
I see that the Dominican majority is trying to cover what I have to say. 30 years, if you hear the history, you'll see that Haiti was there was one island under Haitian domination, okay? So that's something that has not been forgotten, number one. Number two, I want to say that Trujillo's mother was from Haiti, and she was black, and there is a racial issue here that continues to today, because I have friends in Dominican Republic who are Haitian but light-skinned and have the money to buy the house, and they have not been bothered.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We're going to go over here now. This lady right here. And then we'll probably come back over here. Yes, right here.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm really excited to have this great panel. I'm a student here at FIU. I'm doing my master's on the conflict. So albeit, policy and the history, we're looking at a human rights crisis. And what I want is, I guess, an answer as to how do we deal with these stateless bodies that are on the border and are in Haiti with no documentation, do not speak Creole, have lived in the Dominican Republic for generations. How do we address this? Because we can get caught up in this rhetoric, but as you said, Professor Verna, the outcome is a reality we need to discuss. Good. So who do we address? What government do we address? Do we rely on the international community?
You have a question. Good. We have a question.
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the panel. We do have a comment and a question, so Eduardo, I'll start with you.
Okay, I'm delighted to hear that question, okay, because I think really this is what we should be dealing with. And let me just preface this by saying, and I think it's important to say this, right? The Dominican Republic is not governed by Trujillo anymore, okay, number one. But, and secondly, Haiti is not governed by Duvalier, all right? And so I think we need to put aside those perceptions. And I do think, your explanation of race, what you guys have discussed about race, are really profoundly still there. For crying out loud, in the United States, after 40 years of civil rights, this is a country that is still profoundly racist. So let's not assume that things are just going to be changed overnight. So I think, I think it's important to place that context. But the question that you asked is really, I think, the most important one. What are we going to do to address this problem? All right? And I have to tell you that, to me, it really is about something that's quite striking. The Dominican Republic just celebrated this week 10 million citizens, all right? And Haiti has 10 million people as well. That's 20 million on this island, all right? And within the next 2 decades, right, you're going to have 40 million people sharing that island. And the real problem, of course, is, and again, maybe I'm being too much of an economist here, but, you didn't invite an economist, but, the reality is that if only one side of the island is creating the jobs, and we in the United States have essentially decided that any Haitian that gets on a boat is not going to land in Florida, right? And the Bahamians have decided that they're going to deport all Haitians. The only possibility of escape that Haitians have then, in terms of attraction for jobs and so on, is the Dominican Republic. So the solution, in my opinion, right, and again, being partially trained as an economist, rests in some recognition that both countries will have to deal with the 40 million that they will have within the next couple of decades, and the fact that somebody has to create and provide employment for them. And there is a plan there, which I was very privileged to participate in. And in fact, the very first meeting of that group was met here at FIU under the sponsorship of SIPA, the Quisqueya group, right? And which now has a very distinct plan with the support of Dominicans, the top Dominican entrepreneurs and the top Haitian entrepreneurs who got together and negotiated a very significant proposal to create an opportunity there for growth and for trade integration. Now, the problem, of course, is, and you addressed it, and it is that both sides are deeply nationalist. And it's at moments like this when the extremes dominate the political debate, when reasonable outcomes can't be reached because we're dominated by the activists on the extreme right or the activists on the extreme left, whichever position you want to take. I would say, let's take a look at what we have as a major proposal for job growth and trade integration. And let's reframe that, and let's look at it as a solution going forward. Because whether Dominicans like it or not, or whether Haitians like it or not, you're going to have 40 million people on that island and no capacity to deal with their basic needs.
Thank you. Ernesto, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that we're still getting off track. We're turning this conversation into an issue about migration and history. And the issue I think we were aiming to address here is essentially about what we're going to do with about 4 generations and counting of Dominicans of at some point Haitian ancestry, whether it's immediate or 3-4 generations. And I mean, you can, thank you. You can make the argument that they were never Dominican, but God, you could have fooled me because a lot of these people were issued Dominican documents, they married into Dominican society. It's okay. I'm not making a political point here, okay? I'm just making a human rights point here. So these people grew up believing and have children believing that they were Dominican and they contributed to Dominican society by working, serving in the armed forces, you know, all the things that Dominicans did, and then practically overnight they learned that they are not Dominican anymore. And I think that that's the real issue we're discussing here, migration, and those are issues that are the rights of sovereign states, and countries have the right to regulate migration. I think the issue is, like Edilberto said, the retroactive nature of stripping 4 generations of citizenship that by all standards they had, including the issuing of documents.
We're going to go this side now.
Yeah.
My name is Eugenio Roth. I'm a professor in the medical school. I'm a psychiatrist.
We need you here.
I'm the product of exiles that went to the Dominican Republic, but my father was the ambassador for the Knights of Malta to Haiti for more than 25 years, and they sponsored the hospital de Sacré-Cœur in Milo in Cape Haitian. So I'm very familiar with both sides of the story. I wanted to, you know, psychiatrists deal with feelings and emotions. So many times when people behave in irrational ways, it has to do with unconscious emotions. So I wanted to bring up an emotion which is fear. I went to elementary and part of high school in the Dominican Republic, and we were taught about the Haitian invasions, that Haitians came in hordes and destroyed everything and killed and pillaged, that there was a 22-year Haitian occupation that stripped Dominicans of their identity. Why is this relevant, I think? Because after the Haitian earthquake, as the panelists have already addressed, the Dominican Republic was scared of being overrun by an onslaught of refugees. And one wonders, where is France? France crippled Haiti's progress from the very beginning. Where is French Canada, the Bahamas, etc.? So the point I want to propose is we have to consider the feeling of fear. In El Corte, when Trujillo massacred the Haitians, there was a fear, again, that the Haitians were overrunning the Dominican Republic. When people have unconscious emotions, there's in the national unconscious, there's a fear of Haiti. And I think that should be
Thank you.
taken into account.
We're going to go here now.
Yeah,
This
Frank, can I
student-
just make a point of clarification?
This student right here, right here, right here. Right here.
Make a point of clarification.
Just after her question.
Yep, sure.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My
Hi.
name is Natalie. I'm a student here at FIU. I just came from the Dominican Republic like a month ago. I'm from there in the corner, La Romana. I grew up there, and there's a lot of Haitians there because of the sugar plantations. So I know the reality. We all live like brothers. They walk around the street. There's no discrimination whatsoever. So I know what it's like to grow up, surrounded by them. Even one of the ladies in my house, she was family. Okay, she was not cleaning lady, she was my family. She raised me, she helped me, me and my brothers. So, I just hate it when people blame us for being this and that, when, there is racist, but it's not all of us. I want to comment on the way that you referred to as taking away the citizenship and how you use the term. I want to put an example as something that happened to me. I moved here one night tower, and I'm going to try to be quick. And I parked in the side of the streets. And I've been parking there for the first 2 weeks, and nothing happened to me. I didn't get a ticket or anything. So I'm like, I'm not aware of the laws, but I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do this because nobody has told me anything. Well, one day an officer came and he gave me a ticket. I couldn't argue with him. Oh, I've been here for 2 weeks and you didn't say anything because that's a law. I'm going to give you a ticket because that's part of the law. Maybe I didn't do it before, but you're illegally parking there, which is something that is happening with our ruling, with the constitutions. Yes, you're born here, and maybe the authorities weren't taking action towards what our constitution said, but now, yesterday, they decided to do something about it, and they are in the right to do it. Now, because of human rights, that you both mentioned, we gave those people an status. I cannot recognize you as a citizen because my constitution says that I cannot. But I give you a status because you don't speak Creole, you've never been to Haiti, you've always been here, and because of human rights issues, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to be there.
Okay, thank you. So, Chantal and then Eddie.
Sure. Maybe Edilberto will speak more to this. I think the analogy is a flawed one, but I'll stop there. I just want to say that it's really important to clarify the history behind the people typically refer to the Haitian invasion. Scholarship that's coming out now talks about the unification of the island. And I think it's really important to be aware of that history because back to one of my first points, it had to do with political allegiances on both sides of the border and an interest in either defending against Spanish colonial rule or colonization by Spain, by the Dominican Republic being annexed by the United States. These were some of the motivations that had people on the Dominican side of the border and on the Haitian side of the border create alliances that facilitated what was a period of unification on the island. I think it's important that was just one moment. It speaks to the fact that not everybody on the island agrees, but until we start to understand that particular point of history in that way, we're going to be still in this very polarizing way of the conversation. And until we address that polarizing energy, as our in-house psychiatrist has brought to the fore and we're experiencing in this room, until we deal with that, it doesn't matter what policies, what papers people have, it can continue to be undone.
Thank you, Chantal.
Yeah, just quickly, in terms of the analogy, it is interesting. It is a nice analogy. Unfortunately, it's slightly inaccurate. It is as if you were parking there and you received a parking permit, essentially for the entire time you were there. And then as a result of a change in policy at FIU, you received a ticket, but everyone in your family that was born and alive is also receiving a ticket. That is a closer analogy to what is transpiring here. But more importantly, more to the point, I think we're running astray and we're falling victim to what we said we didn't want to do, live in the past. I think the question that was posed a little while ago is truly the $64,000 question. I think Dr. Gamara's point with respect to economic mobility and development is an important one, but it's also a very long-term one. I'd be interested to know what my fellow panelists and perhaps members of the audience would think about in terms of moving forward, because that's what we haven't done, right? We've taken our ground and positioned ourselves for battle, pro this, anti that. But what we haven't talked about is how do we address the estimates of 40,000 and more that are displaced. And even finding out who they are. I think it's an important issue, and maybe what's the United States' role in that? I'd be interested.
Let's go here. Gentleman right here in the middle.
Yes.
My name is Michael Bertino. I'm a senior student here at FIU, majoring in international relations, hoping to minor in Latin American studies. I'm neither Haitian nor Dominican, and my question is a little conceptual.
Why not?
I think that this question of Dominican citizens of Haitian descent finds similar parallels in the political discourse in the United States right now. We're also seeing in other countries across Latin America, such as Brazil and Venezuela, which had previously not had migration issues, where those are currently becoming more and more prominent. And my question is, to what extent does the panel think that the outcome of the situation in the Dominican Republic will have a weight to bear on other American societies dealing with migrations, the scale of which we haven't seen in decades?
Get ready, Eduardo, for that one.
Yeah.
Okay, over here. Yes, you, right here, gentleman. Yes. Sally?
Yeah, I have a question.
Wait for the mic.
Mike.
And identify yourself, please.
Yeah, I have a question for three of you, so I'll be individual.
One question for three or
Yeah, one question for
three or
each,
three
or three,
questions?
but they're different because it depends on, like, she's from history, so quick. I know that you talked about what Trujillo did with the Pearl Hill Massacre, but we have to talk again about what happened with El Degüelle de Moca in 1865, if I'm not wrong, which was another massacre made by the Haitian government. Then I was going to ask you, now that you were talking about the racial issue, is Trinidad and Tobago and what Bahamas is doing, and which is basically the same thing, is it also a racial issue?
What they're doing with what?
Like
Deporting-
the deportations of Asian, of Dominicans of Asian or Bahamians of Asian descent, and and this one is the most important for me. The first one is this law, which I know was different. It didn't say specifically illegal people, but it did say in transit, and this in transit was defined in 1932 already with already court ruling by certain factors. One of them, anyways, it was defined in many different Supreme Court decisions, rulings. Another thing is it hasn't been explained the fact that the Dominican National Regularization Plan actually gave the citizenship to 50,000 people. 50,000 people actually received. They did a search throughout the registry, the Dominican registry, and those people who were subscribed as Dominicans, who had their papers, actually are now Dominicans. For example, Juliana de Guis is now Dominican.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Okay, good. So why don't we, Eduardo, start with you and then move on.
Okay, a couple of things that again, I'm glad that we've had two questions about where we're going rather than where we've been. Okay, and I think Heriberto, that there is a plan. Okay, there is something concrete. My sense is that the only way to address this issue is through job creation, because essentially what happens is that you have an enormous number of people who are jobless, whether it's on the Dominican side or on the Haitian side. And unless we find a mechanism to do that. Look, right now, if you look at patterns of migration, we actually have an interesting pattern of migration from the United States to Mexico. There are more Mexicans going back than we have Mexicans coming in. Mr. Trump doesn't quite recognize that. But, part of it has to do with some economic growth that's going on and our crisis, all right? Well, I think that we have to address this issue. Whether you're talking about Dominicans of Haitian descent or whether you're talking about Haitian migrants in the Dominican Republic, the reality is that they're coming because Haiti does not have the capacity to absorb that population. And they're going elsewhere. And so I think, to me, if we don't address that issue, And if we repatriate, if you force them back into Haiti, look, the biggest problem that Haiti faces today, in my view, is, there's an electoral process right now in a very, very convoluted, there's 54 presidential candidates. There's two rounds the first round for the parliamentary just took place on August 9th. October 25th will be the first presidential round. By December, hopefully there will be a new president in Haiti. But until Haiti gets, some kind of governability, right? Job creation in Haiti is frankly an illusion, and it's sad. Now, having said that, all right, to address your question, again, I do believe in birthright citizenship, all right? But I have a feeling that birthright citizenship is unfortunately a thing of the past. And increasingly what we're going to face in the Americas, including the United States, right? Including the United States. I mean, if you just listen, just the Republicans, but take a look at what I think unfortunately will be the outcome of comprehensive immigration reform. The Dominicans had comprehensive immigration reform, okay? The trend worldwide is toward denying birthright citizenship. And I think the Americas, because of the trend, because we went toward birthright, because we were empty countries, today, in countries that are largely overpopulated, or where there's a lot of concentration, especially urban concentration, where these issues exacerbate, I think the trend is going to be throughout the region.
Chantal?
Hi. Well, much could be said, but I would, again, just reinforce the need to address the social level of the situation, that it can't strictly be jobs, particularly because many of the jobs, in terms of plans and proposals that are discussed, are often reinforcing the very problem and the very situation that we've come to. These are low-wage positions. Okay, perhaps there's going to be an effort to make them higher wage positions, but these are economic models that, to introduce a little bit more economics, economic models that, again, depend on the marginalized status of the very people that we're attempting to speak on behalf
So
of.
what would you propose, Chantal?
Instead of
the model?
Yeah, so I think
What
we
would
need
you
to
propose?
think about economic models where people are in fact valued, people are given living wages.
But how does that, how do you concretize that?
By beginning to actually have real conversations about that. We don't talk about that. We tout these trade models. We tout bringing in investors from outside. That what do? Flood, whether it's a Dominican market or a Haitian market or a Jamaican market, right? Flooding those markets with
If I may, let me just give you one concrete example, and I won't mention the name of the Dominican investor, but this is, in Guanaminth, up north. A Dominican investor, right, from Santiago, right, went in and invested heavily in a factory there, right? All of his employees are Haitians, right? But let me just tell you in terms of the social impact of that. When he first opened, people would walk there, right? Then they started going in bicycles. If you go to his factory today, it's all motorcycles outside. All right? And if you go to their houses, and I did the study, so I know this, right? When you go to their houses, there has been, a dramatic social impact, right, by an investor, right? Now, he could have been Chinese, right? Now, there are Koreans that are investing in Haiti that are having a similar, very small scale impact. So, it's not that I'm, and I've been accused of being a neoliberal before, and I don't shy away from that label, but let me just tell you that I don't know of an alternative to foreign direct investment in contexts like this, right? Now, should those companies be required to respect basic human rights? Yes. Should there be a minimum wage? Absolutely. Should there be, labor rights and so on? Absolutely. But I just think that a lot of this discussion of alternative models, I just simply haven't seen.
Quickly, Chantal.
I'll just say very quickly, I think that because we haven't seriously invested in supporting alternative models, entrepreneurship is just one basic example, and really giving access to everyone within an economy.
Jean, want to give you a chance?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm more of a Latin Americanist than a specialist of the Caribbean. But from what I know of what has been going on in the DR, is that the very formation of Dominican nationalism is highly dependent upon a negation of Haitianness, and that's not the case in the Trinidad and Tobago, and that's not the case in the Bahamas. I mean, the very close, despite the content of our conversations today, the very close relationship between Haiti and the Dominican Republic makes the expulsion of Haitians out of the Dominican Republic, or of Dominicans of Haitian descent out of the Dominican Republic, a particular kind of process that should not be simply equated with the migration issue that might have been taking place in the Dominican, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Barbados. So one shouldn't absolutely try to negate the fact that, as so many social scientists have shown in wonderful research, anthropologists, sociologists, is that people will prefer, a great proportion of Dominicans will prefer to self-identify as and justify the eventual brownness of their skin with references to Taínos instead of making references to Africa. And then the relationship to Africa is given to Haiti, and so this is something that is very much part of the picture, I think.
And Neto, you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of quick points as such way to Eduardo. I always tell my students that back in the 1930s, it was hard to think of Europe, in good terms. So here we have Germany and France that have fought wars, that have cost millions of lives, and the European Union and the economic bonanza that the European Union brought, of course, lessen a lot of those tensions, and now they have all the stake in the same economic pot. So definitely increasing the size of the pie, of the economic pie, helps solve all these problems. Obviously, economic scarcity exacerbates political concerns, and the psychiatrists over there their fears. Okay, but I have another issue that I think that is particularly important to Dominicans and to the quality of Dominican democracy. And constitutions should be enablers. Okay, constitutions should be about giving people rights rather than taking rights away, or in this case, limiting rights by very strict definitions. And what I feel about this unfortunate decision, legal yet unfortunate, okay, is that it kind of undermines the quality of democracy in the Dominican Republic. It undermines the rule of law in Dominican democracy, because all of a sudden you are taking away a nationality citizenship that people believe, and actually not only believe, the state had granted to them. So I think that Dominicans should be particularly concerned about this decision, not because these people are Haitians or whatever, how far back as you want to take history, but what does it say for the rule of law and the quality of democracy in the Dominican Republic when the Supreme Court engages in a retroactive decision that affects so many lives.
I want to
Applause, please.
chance for the pause.
No, it's okay.
Address briefly the question you raised, and I think it's a good one. I would direct your attention to the immigration laws of the Dominican Republic dating back to 1939 and repeated court decisions that interpreted that law to mean in transit an individual going from one country to another. And as the Inter-American Court on Human Rights said repeatedly, it's absurd to think that in transit applies for 8 decades. People living there, having families, knowing no country other than that one to be in transit. It defies logic. So that's just the answer to your question. And bear with me. In terms of moving forward, I think still, we're polarized, and then no one, and I was one that expressed this to the fellow panelists. No one panel is going to address the issues, but I would hope we would think about
ways to examine these issues in the future and proposals for change. And I do believe in economic development without question. It's hard not to be supportive of that, but we still run into the problem of tens of thousands of individuals that have nowhere to go. They're either be they welcome camps on the Dominican side or relocation centers on the Haitian side. That's a human rights issue. I think it's incumbent upon the United States to use its economic and political power to bring the parties to the table to address that issue, at the very least. Long-term solutions, yes. Living in the past, no.
Okay, thank you. So this lady here has had her hand up for a while, and then we're going to go here.
Thank you. It's nice to be today here in FIU. My name is Yuni Segura. Okay. More than making questions, I am very passionate with the history in the island, all right? And I know the young people, young generation, Dominicans and Haitians, need to know more about what happened in the island even before 1492.
But man,
It's a lot of issue. Yeah.
We need to be
going
brief.
to the point.
No.
I'm going to the point. First of all, I want to challenge FIU as a Dominican person to make another forum where a Dominican be represented in that panel. This is number one. It's two Haitians, two Puerto Ricans, Señor Gamarra and you. But I challenge, pardon, I'm sorry.
No,
I challenge to represent.
Excuse me, ma'am, you
And, please,
please, sir, sit down.
pardon.
Sir, sit down.
Some Dominican in the panel, that's it. And second, I really, as a Dominican diaspora, to invite the Haitian diaspora because this is problem in the island. And I think we need to sit down together to find solution for the island because each country progress in the island is much better for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so John, if I could take two more questions or comments. Yes. We're going to go with that gentleman right there, and then with this lady right here. Okay.
By the way,
sir, please, and then we're going to go here, and I'm afraid we're running out of time. I know we're here.
I was born in the Congo from a Congolese mother, a Belgian father, and I grew up in Belgium. I speak French.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Kidani. I'm from the Bahamas. Okay, it's easy to say to forget the past, but the past affects a mindset of a people. Okay, I think the only person that brought up the human rights issue was a young lady right there. We all know this is legal, but once again, in America, slavery was also legal, but that didn't justify it. I think it's more of a human rights violation than a legal issue.
Okay.
That's where the problem is.
Thank you. Sally?
Hi. Losers and winners write a history of their own view. And the bilateral relationship between Dominican Republic and Haiti has been twisted by politics interest and economic interest. About human rights, how many Haitians count with an ID? That's my question. How many Haitians had rights in their countries?
Had what?
How many Haitians have right to an ID? Because I work with the frontier. Who knows the real relationship of Buenamente and Dajabón, Veladera, Elias Piña, Malpaz y Jimani, Sabanet, Lamier, Lemet, Gonaif, Iliabash? Who knows the reality there? If you know the reality, talk to me with argument and basis.
Okay, so, Beneto, you wanted to say?
We researched that reality, but it's besides the point.
Go ahead, elaborate.
I'm sorry?
Elaborate.
Oh, we can do another panel about Haiti, but this is not a panel about Haiti, but there are a lot of people. I will recommend the works by Samuel Martinez, who actually did research.
Quiet, please. Okay.
I'm part of the Dominican diaspora. What is a Dominican? What is a Dominican supposed to look like? Here we go to the issue of national identity. But Samuel Martinez.
Ernesto, excuse me.
Samuel Martinez has done very good work about Haitian migratory circus, and there's very good field work that have been done in Haiti.
John, you want
but again,
to close?
that's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, so unfortunately, as I said, we've passed the time, and so I want to.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the Green School. I would remind you that on October 14th, former Prime Minister Laurent Lamothe will be here to discuss Haiti and its future, followed by a presentation by Leonel Fernandez, former DR president, on October 22nd. Excuse me, could I finish? I really want to thank our panelists because I think I think this represents the best of FIU, its depth, its the quality of our faculty, its civility, and a commitment to honesty and candor. So Heriberto Roman, Eduardo Sagas, Jean Reher, Chantal Verna, Eduardo Gamara, and Frank Mora, my sincere thanks. We will continue the conversation, and I hope as we move forward, the Green School can provide some solutions and chart a better future in these two important countries. Good afternoon, everyone.